Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some events stick in our minds and shape who we are as a group while others fade away? Well, this new study dives deep into that question, exploring what makes certain historical moments important for us to remember across different countries. Imagine standing in front of your country's history. Which moments would you choose to highlight? The big victories, the great leaders, or maybe the tough lessons learned? Scientists have long thought that we, as a group, tend to remember the past in a way that makes us look good, that protects our positive group picture. It is like wanting to remember all the times we did something great and maybe forgetting the times we messed up. But is that really true everywhere? For everyone, this research set out to find out. The big idea is that remembering history isn't just about knowing facts. It is about how these memories help us feel good about who we are as a group, our in-group. We tend to want to keep alive the stories that paint our group in a good light, that show us as active, moral, and successful. But this study looked at this idea from a new angle. Instead of just asking people what events they remember, they asked them about the qualities of those events. They wanted to see if certain characteristics of a historical moment make us more likely to want to remember it. And they did this in 7 different countries to see if this identity protection idea holds up everywhere. Think about your own family history. You might tell stories about your grandparents' amazing achievements, but maybe skip over the time they had a big argument. It's a similar idea with countries and groups. We're not just passive keepers of history. Collective memory, the shared memories of a group, is an active process. We shape it, we reconstruct it. Why often? It is to build and defend who we are, our collective identity. Favorable historical memories give us meaning and a sense of belonging. It is like social identity theory suggests. We want a positive self-concept, and that extends to our group. So, we might use the past to create flattering images of our group. This is why many researchers have seen remembering history as a purposeful act, serving our group's need for a good identity. Now, the common belief is that we really don't want to remember things that make our group look bad. Some scientists have even said that collective memory is biased, selective, and distorted to meet these group needs for a positive identity. They think we act like lay censors, keeping quiet about history that doesn't fit our desired image. However, here is the crucial part of this study's motivation. This idea, while popular, hasn't been tested much. It has been assumed but not really proven with solid evidence, especially across different places. This is where it gets interesting. Sometimes we do remember really painful events called collective traumas. These are huge threats to our identity. But even remembering these bad times can be useful. It can help us spot danger, make sense of things, and even find a sense of morality. Think about the memory of a Holocaust or enslavement. These are deeply negative, but they shape a group's identity and understanding of itself. This suggests that maybe we remember history for reasons other than just looking good. Other ideas suggest that we remember history not just for identity, but to understand the world. Remembering the past, both good and bad, can make the world today make sense. Understanding why things are the way they are. If we want to fully understand the world, we might need to face history, even parts that aren't great for our group's image. And a big gap is that this identity aspect hasn't been thoroughly checked in different countries. History and how we remember it are deeply shaped by where we live. So to understand identity management in remembering, they needed to look globally. So these researchers decided to try something new. Instead of picking events and asking people if they were important, they took a bottom-up approach. They first asked people to list important historical events from their own country and world history. This gave them a whole bunch of events nominated by people themselves. Then they looked at the characteristics of these events that people thought were important. They focused on what functions history serves, rather than just the events themselves. They predicted several things. First, if our group was involved in an event, we'd be more likely to remember it. Makes sense, right? It has to be connected to us. Second, they thought we'd prefer positive history, especially if our group was part of it. Happy memories of our group are good for our self-esteem. Third, morality. Being part of a moral group is a big part of a good group identity. So they thought we'd really want to remember stories where our group acted morally. Fourth, agency. We like to think our group makes an impact, that it has agency, that it is responsible for shaping events, especially in a good way. This makes us feel important. And finally, they also thought recent events involving our group might be more memorable because they feel more connected to who we are today. They conducted this study in 7 countries: the US, Australia, Germany, Iceland, India, Chile, and Kenya. This is fantastic because it covers a wide range of cultures and histories. They first asked over 1,000 people to name important events. Then they took the most commonly named events, around 360 in total, and presented them to over 2,000 new participants. These participants then rated these events on things like how positive or negative they were, if the in-group was involved and how if the in-group acted morally, if they had agency, and when the event happened. All these ratings were then linked to how much people wanted to remember these events. It is really cool how they chose these countries. The US has a history of exceptionalism, but also ongoing debates about injustice. Australia and Germany are known for being more self-critical about their past, especially regarding colonization and war crimes. Iceland is a small nation with a strong sense of independence. India is incredibly diverse with a complex history of conflict and modernization. Chile went through a dramatic shift from democracy to dictatorship and back, shaping its memory politics. And Kenya, standing at a crossroads, navigates between remembering colonial or ethnic conflicts and building inclusive narratives. These different contexts are essential for understanding how collective memory works. So how did they actually measure all this? For in-group involvement, they asked if the in-group was mostly the originator of the event, a recipient, or uninvolved. For positivity and negativity, they asked how positive or negative the event and its consequences were. For morality, they asked how moral their in-group behaved. For agency, they measured the in-group's power and responsibility. And for remembering, they used a scale that captured how important it is for society to deal with an event, to keep its memory alive, and to pass it on to future generations. This willingness to remember is their key measure. It's not just about knowing an event happened, but about believing your society should remember it, teach it in schools, and see it in films. It's about actively wanting to keep that memory alive. Now, what did they find? It is a mixed bag, but fascinating. First, like they predicted, people generally wanted to remember events their in-group was involved in. This was pretty consistent across most countries, though the role of that involvement varied. Some countries preferred remembering when their group was the cause, others when they were the recipient. So involvement is key, but how we were involved matters differently everywhere. This is where it gets more complex. They thought we'd really push to remember positive events where our group was involved and avoid negative ones. In some countries, like the US, Iceland, India, and Chile, people generally preferred positive events regardless of their group's role. This hints at a general preference for positive memories, not just identity protection. But Germany was different. Germans were more willing to remember negative events. However, even for Germans, their openness to negative history changed if their in-group was on the receiving end. They preferred remembering positive history related to their group. This is where identity protection might be kicking in. Morality was a big one. In most countries, the US, Iceland, India, Chile, and Kenya people preferred remembering events where their in-group acted morally. This strongly supports the idea that being seen as moral is crucial for group identity. Agency also mattered. Most countries supported remembering events where their in-group showed power or responsibility, except in Iceland, where agency wasn't as strong a factor. This is a really surprising finding for H6, the interaction of agency and morality. While some countries actually avoided remembering when their group acted immorally while having power, the US and Australia showed the opposite. People there were more willing to remember events where their group had power or responsibility, even if those actions were immoral. This is super counterintuitive for identity protection. It hints that maybe in these contexts, power and agency are so highly valued that they can even override negative moral judgments in memory. As for recency, it was a bit of a mixed bag. Some countries liked remembering recent events, but the idea that recent in-group events were especially preferred didn't hold up consistently. They also looked at group threat. Generally, in most countries, people were less likely to remember events that threatened their group's values or well-being. This fits the identity protective idea. Subjective recency, how recent an event feels to someone, also mattered. But interestingly, these feel-recent events weren't necessarily seen as positive for the in-group. Looking at the whole picture, the study found that identity concerns do matter for remembering history, but a lot less than some theories predicted. The findings showed a clear cross-national gradient. Some countries, like Australia and Germany, showed only a few identity protective patterns. Others, like the US, Iceland, India, Chile, and Kenya showed stronger tendencies to remember in-group, affirming history, especially when it involved morality and agency. But even there, it wasn't a perfect fit. So, why are there differences between countries? The researchers explored two big ideas. First, individualism. In more individualistic cultures, people might feel less tied to group history, and this weakened the pull of remembering in-group affirming history. They found that as country-level individualism increased, the link between remembering positive in-group events, moral actions, and agentic acts weakened. Basically, in more individualistic societies, there is less pressure to preserve a positive group narrative. Second, they looked at global connectedness. Countries that are more integrated globally might care more about their international reputation. They found that in more globally connected countries, people were less likely to want to remember positive in-group history, and more likely, interestingly, to remember negative consequences caused by their in-group. Perhaps in countries with a strong global standing, there is less of a need to constantly boast about past achievements and a willingness to acknowledge more complex histories. They also checked if powerful institutions like schools or governments influence what we remember. They found that while these institutions play a role, they didn't fully explain the differences they saw between countries. This means that what individuals want to remember can sometimes be different from what authorities push. So, what does this all mean? The study confirms that identity concerns do play a role in what history we want to keep alive. We generally lean towards remembering events that involve our in-group and in many places portray that in-group positively, morally, and as having agency. However, the assumption that we only remember history to protect our positive identity is an oversimplification. The findings reveal that how groups remember their past isn't uniform. Memory wars, or disagreements about what history matters, aren't just about different ways of interpreting the same event. They can be about fundamentally different desires or lack thereof to remember history that favors the in-group. The researchers suggest that cultural factors like individualism and global connectedness are key to understanding these differences. Less individualistic and less globally connected countries seem to have a stronger drive to preserve in-group, affirming histories perhaps to build or assert their identity on the world stage. Crucially, identity protection is likely just one piece of the puzzle. The study found evidence that other factors are at play. For example, a general preference for positive memories across countries, even without in-group involvement, might be linked to mood regulation, the desire to feel good. People might seek positive memories to boost optimism or cope with perceived social decline. Now, every study has its limits. One thing is that the events they studied were based on what people nominated. This means truly forgotten events wouldn't be included. Also, people might consciously or unconsciously avoid mentioning events they don't want to confront. Like historical wrongdoings, they also point out that their study looked at specific characteristics. Collective memory can be more complex, involving narratives of redemption or learning from defeat, which might not fit neatly into their measured categories. This is a great point. Sometimes a single event might seem negative on its own, but if it's part of a larger story of overcoming adversity or national rebirth, that larger story becomes what's worth remembering. Future research could explore these bigger narratives. To wrap up, this study makes a strong case that while we do tend to favor remembering histories that paint our group in a positive light, it's not a universal, one-size-fits-all phenomenon. Our desire to remember the past is deeply woven into our cultural context, our global standing, and potentially even our need for optimism and meaning beyond just group pride. The story of history isn't just told by the victors or even just by those who want to look good, but by a complex interplay of cultural forces and individual needs. It's a reminder that collective memory is living, breathing, and different everywhere we look. What do you think? Does this resonate with how you see national or group histories being remembered? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this dive into collective memory interesting, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating insights into the human mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.